They told her to wait outside. 7 words, sharp, sterile, and steeped in every silent prejudice she had fought her entire life. "Captain Daniels, we need you to wait outside." It wasn't just a request. It was a decision, a declaration, and it hit Maya Daniels with more force than any turbulence ever had at 35,000 feet. Have you ever been in a room you earned your way into only to be asked to leave because someone decided you didn't look the part? Then this story is for you. If you've ever had your competence questioned the moment you walk through the door, drop a comment below that says, "I belong." Because you do. Now come with me, because Maya Daniels didn't just walk out that day. She walked into something much bigger. It was supposed to be a triumphant morning. December fog clung to the tarmac at O'Hare International Airport as Maya navigated through the terminal, her uniform crisp, her posture regal. At 37, she had already logged over 15,000 flight hours. She had flown into every kind of sky, clear, stormy, war-torn. She was the pilot you'd want behind the controls in an emergency. The pilot who could keep her voice steady when alarms blared and the earth rushed up too fast. Today marked her first flight as senior captain at Meridian Airlines. Not a co-pilot, not an understudy. The captain, she had earned it. Every stripe on her sleeve, every mile in her logbook, every sleepless night and brutal exam and whispered slight she'd ignored in training rooms and cockpits. She checked her watch, 5:17 a.m., 13 minutes before the crew briefing. Just enough time for coffee and a moment of stillness. The crew lounge smelled of fresh grounds and nerves. Pilots and attendants murmured over iPads and rosters. As Maya entered, conversations faltered, glances flicked. She knew those pauses well. The unspoken, "She's black, she's a woman. She's in charge." According to industry data, less than 1% of commercial airline captains in the United States were black women. She was, by statistical standards, a miracle. But to her, this was Tuesday. A man approached, tall, late 50s, salt and pepper hair, and the same 4 gold stripes gleaming on his sleeves. "You must be Captain Daniels," he said, extending a hand. "Maya," she replied, shaking firmly. "Captain Richard Whitmore," he nodded. "Welcome to Meridian." "Thank you, sir. It's an honor." "Richard, please," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll be your check captain for the next few weeks." The air shifted. "Check captain." So, she was being watched, evaluated, tested again. Despite already being hired, vetted, and qualified, they'd assigned someone to monitor her, someone with power over her trajectory. Maya remained composed. "I've reviewed the SFO route extensively, and the weather projections show some mild turbulence over the Rockies, but I'm confident." "Good," Richard said, turning. "Briefing room C in 5 minutes." As he walked away, a knot tightened in Maya's stomach. She could read men like him. It was a survival skill, the kind who said diversity is important during press conferences, but flinched when someone like her entered the cockpit. The kind who didn't shout. They smiled, then made phone calls. She fixed herself a coffee. As she stirred, she caught her reflection in the machine's metallic finish. Strong, steady, but something haunted her a memory. Her father's voice, "You'll have to be twice as good to get half as far, but you do it anyway, because you don't get to quit." She walked into the briefing room 5 minutes later. 6 flight attendants and her first officer, James Chen, already seated. "Captain Daniels," James said warmly, rising. "I've heard great things. Looking forward to flying with you." She smiled. Finally, someone genuine. But before she could speak, the door opened again. Thomas Barrett, the Executive Operations Director, entered, with Richard Whitmore beside him. "There's been a change of plans," Thomas announced, avoiding her gaze. "Captain Whitmore will command Flight 207 today. Captain Daniels, we need you to wait outside." Just like that, the words sliced through the room. Silence, stares. A flush of heat crept up Maya's neck. She stood, not trembling, not pleading, just stunned. "May I ask why?" she said, voice steady. "San Francisco is a difficult approach," Barrett replied blandly, "given your unfamiliarity with our internal procedures." "With respect," Maya interrupted, "I've flown into SFO 73 times in 10 years, including in adverse conditions. My records and certifications, this isn't up for discussion," Barrett said, voice hard now. "Please wait outside." And so she did. Maya set her paperwork down with precision, and walked out the door, not broken, not bowed, but burning. She didn't know it yet, but that moment would spark the unraveling of an empire. Because they thought they could sideline her. What they didn't know was that Maya Daniels had no intention of staying outside for long. The hallway outside briefing room C was colder than she remembered, or maybe it was just her skin bristling from the indignity. Maya Daniels leaned against the wall, back straight, coffee cooling in her hand. The door she'd been ordered to exit clicked shut behind her with the finality of a verdict. Inside that room, the seat with her name on it sat empty. Maya took a deep breath, pulling the oxygen into her lungs the way she had done countless times before. Takeoff, slow, intentional grounding. The pilot in her knew how to stay calm under pressure, how to manage multiple failures mid-air and still land the plane safely. But this wasn't just a technical failure, this was a betrayal wrapped in protocol. And it wasn't her first. In over 2 decades of flying from military transport planes in Afghanistan to commercial jets slicing through jet streams over the Atlantic, Maya had encountered prejudice in every form. Passengers who refused to fly if they saw her in the cockpit. Colleagues who whispered behind her back. Supervisors who labeled her emotional when she asked hard questions. But this cut deeper, because she was finally supposed to belong. She closed her eyes, remembering what it took to even get here, graduating top of her class at the Air Force Academy. Logging thousands of hours on missions that tested both her skill and her nerve. Earning every license, every stripe, every commendation, and yet with a single sentence they'd tried to unmake her. Not because of her qualifications, but in spite of them. 10 minutes passed. The door opened, but it wasn't Thomas. Or Richard. It was James Chen. He stepped into the hall, slowly shutting the door behind him as if guarding something fragile. His face was a mixture of discomfort and quiet fury. "Captain," he said softly, I'm sorry." Maya tilted her head, saying nothing. "They told everyone inside it was standard procedure for new captains," James said, "that you'd be shadowing other flights until they were confident in your fit." Her eyes narrowed. James hesitated. "I've been here 3 years. I've seen 4 new captains come through. Not one of them got pulled from their first flight. None of them were made to shadow anyone. And I'm the first black woman they've hired as a senior captain," Maya replied flatly. He looked down. Yeah, there it was. He didn't need to say more. "They're reassigning you to Flight 422 to Seattle," James continued. "They want you to shadow Captain Harold Wilson." Maya blinked slowly. Wilson, she'd never met him, but everyone in the industry knew the name. Senior-most captain at Meridian. Aviation skills unmatched. And a reputation for being unapologetically hostile to diversity efforts. Rumor was, he once said in a company meeting, "I don't care who's offended as long as my plane lands." Of course they'd send her to him. Let him test her, break her, maybe even humiliate her enough that she'd walk away on her own. "I see," Maya said quietly. Captain James stepped closer. "If you want to file a complaint, HR, union, anything, I'll back you up. I'll go on record." She turned to look at him, truly look at him. He was young, brave in a quiet way, but naive still. "A complaint on my first day would follow me for the rest of my career," she said, her voice low but certain. "I wouldn't be seen as the pilot who stood up for herself. I'd be the angry black woman who couldn't adapt." James winced, not because he disagreed, but because he knew she was right. She offered him the smallest of smiles. "Let me handle Flight 422 first. I appreciate your honesty. Not everyone sticks their neck out." He nodded. "Wilson's, old school. Be careful." "I've flown through worse," she said, eyes cool. As he walked away, Maya's phone buzzed. It was a message from her younger sister Zoe. "Knock 'em dead on your first day, sis. So proud of you." Maya stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. For a moment she thought about telling her. About the insult, the injustice, the weight pressing against her ribs. Instead she typed, "All good here. I'll tell you about it tonight." She slipped the phone back into her pocket. She didn't need pity. She needed purpose. She adjusted the strap of her flight case and walked toward the gate for Seattle. They had clipped her wings this morning, but Maya Daniels had been airborne long before Meridian Airlines ever knew her name. The flight to Seattle was supposed to be routine, a quiet short hop across the country. But to Maya, Flight 422 wasn't just a destination. It was a test wrapped in tradition and laced with condescension. Captain Harold Wilson stood by the aircraft when she arrived, already checking the fuselage, clipboard in hand. He was in his early 60s, his silver hair neatly combed back, the edges of his mouth curled into a permanent scowl. When Maya greeted him with a respectful "Good morning, Captain," he responded with nothing more than a grunt. Not a handshake, not even eye contact. The first officer, Peter Lawson, was younger, pale-faced, and visibly nervous. He gave Maya a small apologetic nod as she boarded. She could already feel the temperature in the cockpit, cold, hierarchical, unwelcoming. During pre-flight prep, Captain Wilson didn't speak to her once. He addressed Peter in a clipped tone, ran through the checklists at double speed, and narrated every system adjustment like a man hosting a lecture for an invisible audience. Maya, assigned to the jump seat behind them, listened and observed in silence. The tension in the cockpit was thick. Peter avoided her eyes entirely, like acknowledging her would only make things worse. She didn't blame him. Men like Wilson didn't need to raise their voices to control a room. They ruled through silence, expectations, and the quiet dread that followed every interaction. As the engines roared to life and the Boeing 737 began to taxi, Maya pulled out her own tablet, cross-referencing Wilson's procedures with Meridian's official manual. She'd been told to acclimate to company standards. She would, and then some. At 24,000 feet, Wilson finally spoke to her. "I don't know what kind of operation you came from, Captain Daniels," he said, not turning around, "but at Meridian we follow the book. No shortcuts, no freelancing." The implication wasn't subtle. Maya answered evenly, "Agreed. Standardization ensures safety." Wilson gave a low grunt, clearly disappointed she hadn't taken the bait. He wanted her defensive. He wanted her flustered. But she wasn't here to prove herself to him. The rest of the flight was a clinic in passive-aggressive exclusion. Wilson narrated his every move, explaining procedures Maya had executed hundreds of times before, as if she were a cadet on her first simulator run. He spoke to Peter occasionally, to himself, never to her. She took notes, mentally, emotionally, quietly. Then during descent it happened. Wilson tuned in the wrong frequency for approach control. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was wrong, and Peter didn't notice, or worse, noticed and stayed silent. Maya leaned forward slightly. "Captain," she said calmly, "Seattle approach is using 28.35 today, not 124.75. The cockpit froze for a second. Wilson stiffened. Then, without a word, he double-checked the chart, adjusted the frequency, and cleared his throat. "Thank you, Captain Daniels." The words came like gravel. But they came, and still Maya didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply nodded. After landing, as they taxied to the gate, Wilson broke his silence again. "You've got a good eye," he muttered. "Most wouldn't have caught that." "Thank you, sir." "Don't misunderstand," he added sharply. "One good catch doesn't make you Meridian material. This airline has standards, traditions. Not everyone fits." There it was, the wall, the gate, the ceiling. Maya looked him square in the eyes, through the reflection in the windshield. "With respect, Captain, traditions evolve. They have to." Wilson finally turned to face her, his blue eyes hard as frost. "Not at Meridian, they don't." As she disembarked, Maya's phone buzzed again. Zoe. Another heart emoji and a simple, "How's the sky today?" Maya didn't respond right away. She looked up at the wing of the aircraft, now being inspected by a new crew. The sky beyond it was pale blue, limitless. Her sky hadn't changed. But the people trying to keep her from flying in it had. And they were about to learn, when you try to keep a woman like Maya Daniels grounded, you better check your own altitude. Back in Chicago that evening, Maya sat in her new apartment, her flight bag tucked by the door, her uniform jacket still draped over the arm of the couch. The day's tension lingered in her shoulders, but she refused to let it settle in her spirit. A glass of red wine in one hand, her other hand tapped the edge of her phone, her thumb hovering over Zoe's contact. She finally tapped call. Her sister answered on the second ring, video feed popping up instantly. Zoe Daniels, attorney, activist, and eternal big sister, appeared with furrowed brows and fire in her voice. They did what Maya recounted the day in calm detail, omitting none of the slights being sidelined from her first flight, the condescension from Wilson, the pattern that was already emerging. "That's textbook discrimination," Zoe said, her voice sharp. "You could sue them into next week. That check captain stunt alone. And then what?" Maya interrupted gently. "I become the woman who sued her way into a cockpit. Who's going to trust me in a flight deck after that?" Zoe's frustration was palpable. "So you're just going to eat it?" "I didn't say that." Maya's voice shifted lower, firmer. "I'm not suing. Yet." There was a long pause on the line. Zoe leaned back in her chair, processing. "Then what's your plan? I find out how deep this goes," Maya replied. "This doesn't feel like isolated ignorance. It feels structured, coordinated. You think it's systemic, I think it's orchestrated. I think there's a reason the mentors they're assigning me all happen to be men with histories of opposing change." Zoe narrowed her eyes. "Be careful, corporate networks like this, they protect their own. You start pulling threads, they'll come after you." "I know," Maya said, "but I didn't work 20 years for this seat just to sit down and shut up." That night, long after Zoe had gone to bed, Maya sat alone in the glow of her laptop screen, pulling thread after thread. She dove into Meridian Airlines history, combing through press releases, board member bios and annual reports. Founded in 1967, once a regional favorite, now a national brand. Safety record clean but uninspiring. Leadership white, male, unchanged for decades. She shifted to job review sites. The pattern was unmistakable, glowing reviews from male employees, especially white men. Stark contrast from the reviews of women and minorities who often described Meridian as an old boys' club or a hostile place for outsiders. Then she found something else. A short article, barely 300 words, from 8 months ago. FAA reviewing Meridian Airlines maintenance logs. After discrepancies found, the piece had no follow-up, no outrage, just a blip. But Maya knew better than to ignore a blip. Airlines only hit FAA radars when something significant bubbled under the surface. Discrepancies in maintenance logs weren't just clerical errors. They could be life-threatening shortcuts. She bookmarked the article and kept digging. The next morning, she reported for her new shadow assignment, this time with Captain Andrew Peterson on a flight to Denver. She expected another cold shoulder, but Peterson was cordial. Not warm, but not hostile. Mid-flight, after they reached cruising altitude, he turned to her. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "not all of us agree with how you're being treated." Maya studied him. "But you're not speaking up either." Peterson sighed, eyes forward. "It's complicated. Meridian is traditional." "That word keeps coming up," she said. "Funny how tradition always seems to mean shutting the door on someone different." He didn't respond right away. Then, in a softer voice, "Watch yourself around Barrett and Wilson. They go back 30 years. Barrett protects his circle no matter what, even if they're putting lives at risk." She didn't ask aloud. She didn't have to. His silence said enough. Later that day, after returning to O'Hare, Maya walked through the maintenance bay under the pretense of observing procedures. Most of the crew gave polite, guarded nods. But one technician, a middle-aged black man named Marcus Jefferson, lit up when she introduced herself. "Detroit, huh?" he said, smiling. "Me too. Grew up near Cass Tech." They chatted casually at first, weather engine specs, shared memories of the city. But then when the coast was clear, Maya leaned in. "What's changed here lately?" Marcus's eyes darted around before answering. "Management's pushing us hard," he said. "Faster turnarounds, less time for checks. Stuff we used to have to report. Now it's at our discretion." "Is that even legal?" Marcus grimaced. "It's legal the way they word it. But if you ask me if it's safe," he shook his head. Before she could press further, a supervisor rounded the corner. Marcus stepped back, wiping his hands, and said nothing more. But Maya's pulse quickened. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. As she left the bay, she didn't feel angry. She felt resolved. They thought they could bury her under protocol. They thought they could stall her with tradition. They thought they could silence her by seating her in the shadows. But Maya Daniels had just found the trail, and she intended to follow it all the way to the black box no one wanted opened. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya became a quiet force moving through the heart of Meridian Airlines. She shadowed captains known for their cold professionalism, Men who never looked her in the eye, but watched her every move like she was a liability waiting to happen. Her flight assignments were short hauls at terrible hours with minimal turnaround time and just enough rest to scrape by legal requirements. Her paperwork was double-checked, her sign-offs scrutinized. It was clear they wanted her uncomfortable. They wanted her to break. But she didn't. Instead, she listened. She watched. She remembered. She began keeping meticulous notes, not just of her flights, but of every strange interaction, every corner cut, every time someone said, "That's just how we do things." She was building a case, not in court yet, but in truth. James Chen remained a quiet ally, offering subtle nods and the occasional word of encouragement. One morning before a flight, he handed her a protein bar without a word, a silent acknowledgement of how little rest she'd had. On another, he slipped her a printed route update that hadn't been distributed yet, just in case someone forgot to brief her. And then there was Lauren Kim, senior flight attendant, 10 years at Meridian. Maya noticed her first on a red-eye to Miami, efficient, sharp-eyed, and silently watching everything. After the flight, while stowing their bags, Lauren whispered, "I've seen what they're doing to you. You're not crazy." It was the first time someone had said it aloud. From that moment, a quiet bond formed between them, unspoken but firm. Lauren had her own war stories, inappropriate comments brushed off by HR promotions that mysteriously vanished, and a female colleague who'd been fired after raising safety concerns about an overloaded beverage cart system. Maya nodded. "I need to know if it's just harassment, or something bigger." Lauren's eyes flicked around. "You might want to talk to Marcus again." That night, Maya found Marcus back in the hangar inspecting the belly of a jet scheduled for a dawn departure. He looked over his shoulder before speaking. "They're speeding us up again," he muttered. "Now they're skipping full inspections on overnight planes unless someone complains. It's unofficial, but it's happening." He glanced around and pulled a small envelope from his pocket. Inside were photocopied memos, old service logs, and one maintenance report with 3 lines redacted in black marker. "I've been saving these," he said quietly, "just in case someone brave enough came along." Maya looked up from the papers, eyes sharp. "Why me?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Because you didn't quit. And they're scared of you." The truth landed like a weight in her chest, not because of fear, but because it confirmed what she'd suspected. They knew she was watching. They just didn't know how much she had seen. 3 days later, it all came to a head. Maya was assigned to Captain Flight 889, a red-eye from Chicago to Las Vegas. A grueling route known for disruptive passengers and little margin for error. It was the kind of flight they gave captains they hoped would fail. James was once again her first officer. As they performed pre-flight checks, Maya scanned the maintenance logs. Something stopped her cold. The intake valve inspection date had been overwritten, not once but twice, and the serial number on the form didn't match the official registry. She asked the ground crew to verify. They insisted everything was in order. "I'd like to recheck the system," she said, manually. The lead technician looked annoyed. "Captain, we're already delayed 10 minutes. Maya didn't blink. "Then we'll be 20. I'm not risking 183 lives on sloppy paperwork." She rechecked the system. She confirmed her suspicions, and she signed off with a note that detailed the error and her correction. They took off late, but they landed safely. The next morning, her name was on Barrett's schedule. When she entered his office, he didn't waste time. "You delayed the Vegas flight last night," he said flatly. "We lost nearly 4,200 in gate fees and compensation vouchers." Maya remained standing. The maintenance records were inconsistent. "I followed FAA protocol. Our ground team cleared the aircraft, which does not absolve me of responsibility." Barrett's jaw tensed. "Captain Daniels at Meridian, we value efficiency alongside safety." And when they conflict, his silence was answer enough. Then he leaned forward. "If you can't learn to trust our systems, you may not be the right fit here." Maya didn't flinch. "Would you like to put that directive in writing?" she asked, voice like steel. Barrett's face flushed. "That won't be necessary." She turned to leave. "Good, because I always use my best judgment, and I always will." As she walked out, she knew something had shifted. The game was no longer covert. She was now a target. That night in her apartment, Maya laid out everything on her dining table. Paperwork, memos, notes, timelines, patterns. The web of negligence she'd uncovered wasn't isolated, it was systemic. It was dangerous, and it was protected. But Maya Daniels had never needed protection. She'd always had something stronger. Conviction. She picked up her phone and dialed. Zoe answered instantly. "Tell me you're ready." "I'm ready," Maya said. "Call your contact at the FAA and your friend at the Tribune." A long pause. "You're going to burn it all down," Zoe said quietly. "No," Maya replied. "I'm going to expose it. They'll burn themselves." By sunrise, Maya Daniels had already made 2 moves that Meridian Airlines would not see coming. The first, a carefully crafted, legally formatted report sent straight to the Federal Aviation Administration. Inside were summaries, documentation photographs, internal memos, log discrepancies, everything Zoe had helped her organize into a clean surgical file of undeniable truth. The second, an encrypted folder sent to a seasoned journalist at the Chicago Tribune, one known for unraveling corporate cover-ups like a surgeon dissecting rot from muscle. Her sources were verified, her facts were bulletproof. As the city woke beneath pale skies, Maya walked through O'Hare's bustling terminal like any other crew member, impeccably dressed, calm, focused. But she was no longer flying blind. She wasn't just a pilot now, she was a spark with a fuse. Her assignment that morning, flight to Boston, weather clear, conditions perfect. Everything on paper pointed to a smooth day. But she felt the shift in the atmosphere the moment she entered the briefing room. James was already there, eyes alert. Several crew members avoided her gaze. One whispered behind a tablet. Even the flight attendant who usually greeted her with small talk offered only a nod. Then the door opened and in walked Richard Whitmore. The smirk on his face was all Maya needed to confirm what was coming. "Captain Daniels," he said, voice slick with mock formality, "there's been a change." Maya didn't blink. "Of course there has." "I'll be taking command of this flight," he said, tapping a clipboard without looking at her. "Executive Operations has reassigned you to administrative duties effective immediately." "And what will those duties entail?" Maya asked, her voice neutral. "You'll report to HR after our return. Today is a transition day." Translation, "You've been grounded." Maya nodded slowly, then turned to the crew. "Safe flight, everyone." She gathered her flight bag. There was no anger in her stride, only calculation. In the hallway, Lauren Kim caught up with her. "This isn't right," Lauren whispered. "They're trying to bury you." "I know," Maya replied. "I've been collecting photos." From Flight 336 to Toronto last month, the cabin pressure valve had a visible crack. Visual inspection missed it. They cleared it anyway to avoid cancelling 3 more flights. Maya froze. "You have proof?" Lauren nodded, eyes fierce. "It's on my phone. I'll send it to you." "Send it to this email," Maya said, scribbling on a torn slip of paper. "It's secure, and Lauren, thank you." Lauren looked around and whispered, "If I lose my job for this, you won't." Maya promised. "Not if we do this right." That day she played the role they gave her. She reported to HR, filled out pointless forms, attended a culture fit review. She smiled politely at people who had already written her off. Her ID badge was replaced with a temporary one that limited her access. They thought they had contained her, but they hadn't realized she had already gotten out. Messages began pouring into her phone. "James, this is wrong. Let me know how I can help. Marcus Maintenance Bay, 34, at 4:30. Important." And then, surprisingly, from Peter Lawson, the first officer who'd flown with her and Wilson. "Not all of us are like them. Some of us remember why we became pilots." At exactly 4:30, Maya slipped into Bay 34. Marcus was waiting near the wing of a parked 737, visibly anxious. "I shouldn't be doing this," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "But you need to know." He handed her a USB drive, flight logs, maintenance overrides, internal memos. "They've been downgrading safety issues across the fleet. At least 30% of aircraft shouldn't be flying right now." Maya's stomach dropped. 30%, at least. Anyone who pushes back gets reassigned suspended or, in Paul Decker's case, injured. She stared at him. "The guy who fell off the platform." Marcus lowered his voice. He was speaking up about the 787 engine mounts. 3 weeks later, boom. Broken back, career gone. You think it wasn't an accident? I think nothing around here is. Maya pocketed the drive. Would you go on record? He shook his head, fear sharp in his eyes. I've got 3 kids. This job is my life. You don't have to be the face of this, Maya assured him. You just gave me more than enough. That night, Maya sat at her kitchen table reviewing Marcus's files. Every document fit like a puzzle piece with her own observations. Every redacted memo now had a twin unredacted one. Every suspicion now had proof. She forwarded everything to Zoe. Then she made another call. Chicago Tribune, the voice answered. This is Captain Maya Daniels, she said. You'll want to hear what I've found. The journalist listened, asked questions, verified sources, and finally said, We're in. This is going to be big. The next morning, Maya returned to work as instructed. She was watched. Security guards lingered near every hallway she entered. 8 staff hovered suspiciously by the computers she touched. Executives passed by the glass conference room where she sat peeking inside without subtlety. They didn't know what she had done yet, but they could feel it coming. At exactly 2:00 p.m., she was summoned to the executive conference room. Inside waited Thomas Barrett, Richard Whitmore, Harold Wilson, 2 corporate lawyers in sharp suits. Maya entered without fear. Barrett didn't invite her to sit. It has come to our attention, he began coldly, that you've been accessing restricted areas and soliciting information outside your clearance. You violated your confidentiality agreement. Maya remained silent, arms at her side, spine tall. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Barrett asked. She met his eyes. Am I being fired? You're being offered a chance to resign. One lawyer cut in. With severance, provided you sign this NDA. He slid the paper across the table. Maya reached into her bag, pulled out a folder, and set it down. Before I respond, she said evenly, you should know that this morning my attorney submitted a detailed report to the FAA. Barrett's face froze. The Tribune has received similar documents, including maintenance discrepancies, falsified safety logs, and internal evidence of retaliation. She looked at each man in turn. And a 3rd copy is in secure storage, scheduled for automatic release if anything unfortunate happens to me. Barrett's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're bluffing. Maya smiled. You hope I'm bluffing. She tapped the NDA with her finger. I won't be signing anything, but if you're interested in my terms, I suggest you sit down. The room was dead silent. They hadn't fired her, but Maya Daniels had just grounded them all. Barrett didn't sit. Neither did Whitmore or Wilson. They stood frozen, caught between disbelief and dread, like soldiers suddenly realizing the battlefield had shifted underneath them. Maya remained perfectly still, her presence alone reshaping the room. Not with volume, not with force, but with quiet surgical certainty. The kind that comes from knowing you've already pulled the trigger and the echo is on its way. You've just made a serious mistake, one of the lawyers finally muttered, trying to reassert control. Disseminating confidential materials. Whistleblower protection applies to matters of public safety, Maya interrupted coolly. And federal law supersedes corporate posturing. Barrett's jaw tightened. What do you want? Maya didn't blink. 3 things. The silence that followed was the sound of giants realizing they no longer held the high ground. First, she said, her voice unwavering, I want an immediate halt to all Meridian flights operating aircraft flagged in those reports until full safety checks are completed and verified by an independent FAA-certified team. Whitmore scoffed. You think you can ground the fleet I already have, she said simply. Check your inbox. The FAA's temporary suspension orders went out 20 minutes ago. Your fleet is grounded until further notice. Barrett reached for his phone, thumb trembling slightly. As he opened his email, his face drained of color. The FAA's letter glared back at him, bold and official. Second, Maya continued, you will initiate an internal investigation led by a neutral third party, not your legal team, not your board. An independent audit of every maintenance log, whistleblower retaliation case, and internal promotion over the last 5 years. And third, she said, leaning in just enough to command the moment, I want every disciplinary action, shadow reassignment, and blacklisting against myself and others. James Chen, Lauren Kim, Marcus Jefferson, and anyone else who spoke up reversed and expunged. Immediately. Wilson's face reddened. "This is extortion. This is accountability," Maya corrected. "You gambled with people's lives. With my reputation, with your company's legacy. I'm just making sure the truth gets a seat at the table." Barrett finally sat, and that was the moment Maya knew they were broken. Not destroyed yet, but cracked. And that crack would spread fast. "We'll need time," the other lawyer murmured, already scribbling. "You have 48 hours, Maya said. "After that, the next wave of documents goes public, signed statements, recordings, photos. I'm not waiting while you scramble to spin the narrative." Whitmore tried once more to recover his footing. "Do you think anyone will believe a disgruntled pilot?" Maya smiled. "They already do." And she left, not storming out, not slamming the door, just walking slow, measured, with the certainty of a woman who knew she didn't need to raise her voice to make history listen. The next 48 hours were chaos. Meridian Airlines cancelled 62 flights. Stock prices fell 11% overnight. FAA officials launched an official review. The Tribune published their first front-page exposé. The headline read, "Black Pilot Grounded. By Airline Turns Out She Was Saving Lives." The story went viral in less than 4 hours. Interviews were requested. Politicians tweeted support. Anonymous employees began leaking more documents, some dating back a decade. Inside the company boardroom, panic turned into open warfare. Barrett tried to issue a damage control statement blaming a miscommunication in safety protocol. But Maya's evidence was airtight, her documentation public, and her supporters growing. James Chen was quietly restored to his previous role. Lauren Kim received a formal letter of commendation from the board. And Marcus, he got a visit from 2 FAA investigators who shook his hand and asked him to walk them through every report he had ever filed. And Maya, she waited, not in fear, but in power. Then on the morning of the 3rd day, her phone rang. It was the CEO of Meridian Airlines. Not Barrett, not Whitmore, the actual CEO. "Maya," he said, "I'd like to meet." "In person." She paused. "Then book a seat," she replied. "Coach or first class, your choice. But you're coming to me." He did. The next day, Maya Daniels sat across from the most powerful man at Meridian in a quiet corner of a Chicago law firm, with Zoe seated beside her and 2 federal observers watching closely. And for the first time since this war began, the conversation was different. It wasn't about retaliation. It wasn't about punishment. It was about reform. The CEO laid out a proposal: internal shakeups, new safety protocols, a leadership restructure. And then he asked the question Maya never expected. "What would it take for you to stay?" She didn't answer right away, because Maya Daniels wasn't looking to stay. She was looking to transform. And suddenly, for the first time since stepping into that cockpit weeks ago, she had the leverage to do exactly that. Maya looked across the table at the CEO, the silence stretching between them like the horizon before takeoff. He had just asked her what it would take for her to stay. And for a moment she let the weight of the question hang in the air, not because she was unsure, but because she wanted him to sit in it, to feel how heavy that choice really was. This wasn't about salvaging her job, it was about changing an industry from the inside out. She folded her hands calmly on the table. "I don't want a token title," she said. "I don't want a press release. And I'm not interested in being the face of your diversity brochure." The CEO nodded slowly, listening, though the twitch in his jaw suggested the honesty stung. "If I stay," Maya continued, "it'll be on my terms. You will create an independent safety and ethics division. It will report to the board, not to Barrett, not to Whitmore, not to whoever replaces them." She leaned in. "And I want to lead it." There was a pause. The CEO didn't speak, but Zoe did. Furthermore, she added crisply, "We want assurances of structural reform, transparent pathways to promotion, anti-retaliation policies with teeth, and a formal apology to every employee, silenced or punished for speaking up." The CEO took a long breath. "That's ambitious." "It's necessary," Maya replied, "because the problem isn't just Barrett or Wilson. It's cultural, it's embedded. And until someone with both lived experience and technical expertise rewrites that culture, nothing will change." He tapped his pen against the table for a few seconds before finally saying, "I'll take it to the board. But off the record, I think you're exactly what this company needs." Maya gave a faint smile. "Then let's make sure you're not the only one who thinks so." Within 10 days, the changes began. Barrett resigned for personal reasons. Whitmore was removed from his leadership position. Harold Wilson took early retirement with no ceremony. And Maya Daniels, she was announced as the Executive Director of Safety and Ethics Oversight, a newly formed department reporting directly to the Board of Directors, not the Operations Division. It came with full autonomy, a vetted team, and a mandate that reached across every department. She was no longer just flying planes. She was changing the flight path of the entire industry. And she didn't waste time. Her first act was reinstating every unfairly disciplined employee. James Chen was offered a leadership development track. Lauren Kim was promoted to senior crew trainer with full access to internal safety reports. Marcus Jefferson was hired as a senior advisor on maintenance oversight and given whistleblower protection under federal aviation law. Then came the real work. Maya launched a full audit of maintenance practices and HR grievances. She partnered with external safety regulators and hired an ethics compliance officer from outside the aviation world, someone whose only loyalty was to truth. But change didn't stop with Meridian. When the Tribune followed up with a second front-page story, pilot-turned-corporate watchdog Maya Daniels is rewriting airline safety, other companies took notice. Maya began receiving quiet emails from junior staff at competing airlines pilots who had been pushed out, engineers who had been silenced, attendants who were scared to speak. She responded to every one, and soon she was invited to speak at flight academies, at safety summits, at national labor conferences. She didn't just speak about racism or sexism, she spoke about systems, how they break, how they hide their flaws, and how the most dangerous thing in the air isn't always turbulence. Sometimes it's silence. And through it all, Maya kept flying. She returned to the cockpit once a month, choosing different routes each time. She flew to Anchorage in winter, to Houston in storm season, to small regional airports in the Midwest, where passengers looked surprised to see her behind the controls. Every time she walked into that cockpit, with her head high, her uniform immaculate, and the silent knowledge that she was no longer alone. Because now the system had to account for her. Now they had to adapt. And as she guided each plane into the sky, Maya Daniels understood that some revolutions don't require marches. Sometimes they begin with one woman refusing to leave the room she earned and refusing to stay quiet once she got there. 6 months later, the ripple effects of Maya's stand had stretched far beyond the walls of Meridian Airlines. The FAA, under increased public scrutiny, announced a sweeping nationwide audit of commercial carrier maintenance protocols. Several airlines quietly altered internal policies, hoping to avoid the kind of exposure that had shaken Meridian. Maya had become a lightning rod, both feared and admired, but she hadn't come for applause, she came for change. On a bright spring morning, Maya walked into the Aviation Academy where she had once trained as a cadet. The facility hadn't changed much, same navy blue walls, same faded posters of jet engines and aerodynamic equations, but this time she wasn't here to be evaluated, she was the keynote speaker. The room was filled with young cadets, diverse, wide-eyed, hopeful. Many had followed her story. Some wore pins that read, "I fly because she did," on their lapels. One girl, no older than 19, with dark brown skin and eyes full of intensity, raised her hand after Maya's address. "How did you stay so calm when they tried to push you out?" Maya smiled, the kind of smile earned after surviving storms. "Because I wasn't flying just for me. I was flying for the version of me they didn't want to exist. And every time they tried to clip my wings, I reminded myself I earned the sky." Applause followed, not thunderous, but sincere. That moment was about more than pride, it was about possibility. Maya had become what she never had, a living example that it could be done. Afterward, she met with cadets individually. One young man from a rural town whispered, "I almost quit last year. Then your story hit the news. I figured, maybe I should keep going." She clasped his hand. "Good, we need you up there." As the academy day ended, Maya found herself walking the tarmac behind the building. A single-engine Cessna sat gleaming under the sun, waiting for the afternoon's flight lessons. Behind her came footsteps. She turned to see a young woman approaching flight suit, half-zipped, her curly hair pulled into a neat bun. "Captain Daniels," Maya nodded. "I'm Tasha Whitmore." Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. "Any relation to Richard Whitmore?" The girl nodded. He's my uncle. There was a long pause, but no tension. I used to think flying wasn't for me, Tasha said. Not because I didn't love it, but because he made it seem like the sky belonged to people who looked like him. But after what you did, I realized I don't need anyone's permission. Maya's expression softened. You're right, you don't, Tasha hesitated. He doesn't talk about it, about what happened. But I just wanted you to know, not everyone in our family thinks like him. Maya stepped closer, then break the pattern. Fly better, lead differently. Tasha smiled. That's the plan. As she walked away toward the Cessna, Maya watched her climb into the cockpit and go through pre-checks with smooth precision. Confident, sharp, unshaken. In that moment, Maya realized something. It wasn't just about policy reform lawsuits or headline wins. It was about legacy, the quiet transfer of courage from one generation to the next. The unseen impact of refusing to fold, the ripple of one woman's voice echoing far enough that another could find her own. Later that evening, Maya sat alone on a bench at O'Hare's observation deck, watching jets arc across the pink-orange sky. She still flew once a week, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because even after all the turbulence, the sky still felt like home. Her phone buzzed. Zoe, guess who's trending again? Your face is back on CNN. They're calling you the pilot who grounded giants. Maya chuckled, typing back, let them talk. I've got a 6 a.m. departure. She looked up once more as another jet roared overhead, disappearing into the clouds. Not so long ago, she had been told to wait outside. Now the whole sky answered to her, and she would make sure it stayed open for every voice they tried to silence, for every name they tried to erase, for every woman still standing at the door waiting to be let in. Maya Daniels wasn't waiting anymore. She was flying. They told her to wait outside. And she did, for a moment, not because she accepted it, but because she was calculating how to walk back in, not just through the door they shut in her face, but through the walls they'd built around the entire system. Maya Daniels didn't raise her voice to tear it all down. She didn't throw punches or beg for seats. She simply refused to leave the room she'd earned. And then, she made that room bigger. This story isn't just about one woman, it's about the moment silence breaks, the moment truth outweighs fear, the moment you realize dignity isn't something you ask for, it's something you carry even when no one else will honor it. So if you've ever been overlooked, second-guessed, passed over, if you've been the only one like you in the room, if you've had to stay quiet just to keep your place, this is your reminder. You belong. You earned your seat. You earned your space. And if someone tries to take it from you, let them learn what happens when quiet power becomes unstoppable momentum. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated but rose anyway type? I claimed my seat in the comments and let the world know. And if Maya's story moved you, share this video with someone who's still standing at the door. Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of courage, justice, and unshakable dignity. Because the next flight, it's yours. And this time, you're not waiting outside. You're flying the plane.